Welcome back to this, as I said at the start, very, very different show. We've been looking in part one. That is somebody's dog. Is it yours, Dick Chester, or is it yours, Kieran Maguire?
Yeah, it's the perils of Amazon. You can just see him in the background, I suspect.
I can see. I'll tell you what, I don't want to edit this. I want to leave that in. My cat, Charlie, is sleeping at the moment. Otherwise, he would have made an appearance. This is where we are. And down. I think we should leave all these things in, because this is where we are, you know, with pieces of sticking plaster and pieces of elastic here and there. We're somehow piecing these shows together, and they can be very fun. Dick Chester, former Sheffield United and Sheffield Wednesday secretary, Kieran Maguire, football finance expert. We've looked at how, as far back as the mid-1980s, there were clandestine talks about a breakaway. 10 clubs were involved, including Dick's, at the time, Sheffield Wednesday. It didn't happen. Before we go on to the state, I think that probably is the right word to use, of the two Sheffield clubs currently facing a double relegation, the Steel City. Kieran, the European Super League or the like, we've booted the backsides, but are those backsides, after they've been allowed some time for the bruising to come down, are they going to lock into gear again and put us in this situation once more?
Well, Super League, in theory, still exists in the sense that Real Madrid, Barcelona and Juve are still members of it. So it's not dead. It has been used as a negotiation tool by clubs for the past 15 to 20 years, always with the aim of extracting further cash and further concessions from either the remainder of the Premier League on a domestic front or from the people that run UEFA from a European front. So I think that particular threat is going to be more difficult to try to apply as we go forwards. So we could have a short to medium period of calm, but as the owners change, as Perez moves on and others, they'll be replaced by people with similar ambitions, and their ambition is for their club to have more money. Because if you are a billionaire, there's the one thing that you always want is more money.
Well, we're talking here from the home of football, which is in a parlous state at the moment. Sheffield United's relegation from the Premier League is in many ways predictable. I mean, it could have happened last season, but for the genius of Chris Wilder and the resourcefulness of his players, it is happening in the second season. Sheffield Wednesday's relegation is a story of a steep decline that's been going on for some time. Dick, former secretary of both clubs, any observations from you on the current state of play?
Well, I think in the first part I mentioned my personal views. I'm not being derogatory to anybody, but my personal views on the situation at Sheffield United. As far as Sheffield Wednesday is concerned, I think the first thing you've got to ask yourself is, how come they initially finished up in the situation of having points deducted? They've had points deducted because, from what I've read, of dealings involving the chairman. Now, to me, if the chairman thinks so highly of the football club, how come that he can enter into contractual situations, A, to benefit himself, and B, in the detriment of the club? That is beyond me.
Well, I don't think he's benefited at all himself. I think he's thrown a lot of money at it, and you could say wasted a lot of money in the pursuit of success. Kieran Maguire, you followed the Sheffield Wednesday story. Don't know if you'd agree with me that it's a story of a guy with his heart in the right place, but maybe not a head for English football and the way it operates and what he needs to do to succeed. What's your thoughts on it?
I'm inclined to agree with you, Alan. If we take a look at Sheffield Wednesday under Mr. Mandarich, they ran a relatively tight ship in the sense that it was losing money, but those losses were bearable. As soon as Mr. Chansiri came into the club, he felt he had the Midas touch, and he felt that simply by spending more money, if you take a look at Sheffield Wednesday's wage bill, for example, in 2017, which is his first season, the wage bill increased by 50%, and then it increased by another third the year later. So, that puts an awful lot of strain on the club. He felt that by taking advice from people that he trusted in the industry, that his money would be put to a good cause, and that cause was getting Sheffield Wednesday promoted to the Premier League. When that didn't immediately transpire, the fast rushing train of financial fair play had to be dealt with, and that's where things started to deteriorate even further. Where we've led to the situation where the club doesn't own its own stadium, where it's having to rent it from the owner, albeit at a relatively low rental. And it does cause a lot of consternation if I was a fan, because as soon as you separate football clubs from their biggest asset, as far as the balance sheet is concerned, in the shape of the stadium, you do start to get a little bit twitchy. We've only got to look to see what's happened at Brighton, at Coventry, at potentially Northampton. Yeah. And when you separate those two things, it can turn unpleasant.
My simplistic view, in actual fact, is players come and players go, secretaries come, secretaries go, chairmen come, chairmen go, but the club remains. And the club, in my opinion, belongs to the community. And for that to be taken away from the supporters of Sheffield Wednesday is, in my mind, beyond comprehension. I mean, that might be a simplistic view, but, I think it's been there years and years and years and years. And how many million of people have been through those turnstiles in support of the club to actual fact lose the ownership of the ground, I think is beyond my belief anyway.
In fairness to Mr. Shansiri, he has used words like guardian and custodian and recognition that he's there on behalf of the supporters. You talked about unpleasant times, Kieran. Just how unpleasant could it get for Sheffield Wednesday if they're relegated? Of course, we're still hoping that they don't get relegated. How unpleasant could it be?
Well, if we take a look at Sheffield Wednesday now, in a non-pandemic world, and the club does generate a very significant proportion of its income through ticket sales, which is good, but it makes it vulnerable in a COVID world. It's normally bringing in around about 23 to 25 million pounds a year. Now the broadcast deal, which is worth around about 7 million pounds a year, that's going to drop by about 80%. So you're immediately down £6 million. Are the sponsors going to be as keen to sponsor the club when you've got Rochdale and other clubs, Cheltenham potentially coming to Hillsborough? It's going to be more of a struggle for the commercial department to sell those hospitality packages. I mean, I'm sure that some of the main sponsors, because they also happen to be owned by Mr. Chansiri, they won't change, but it will be that much harder. Certainly, looking at Wednesday's accounts when they were in League One previously, we're looking potentially somewhere in the region, I think, of £8 to £10 million a year lower in League One, and for a club which is a fairly sizable wage bill, albeit one which I think they can address this summer as more and more senior players come to the end of their contracts. It's going to be very challenging for them going forwards.
How challenging for Mr. Shansiri himself? He's shown no reluctance to keep pouring money in to keep the club going, and yet variously during the past season, wages have been paid late. They've been paid, but they've been paid late. Does that suggest a problem to you, Kieran, in terms of continuing to pour money into this hole, really?
Yes, if you know when your biggest cost of the month is going out, you make sure that the money is in the account be there to begin with. It's just like you or I. We've got a mortgage. I make sure that I've been paid and the money is in the account. Or if I'm not being paid, then I've hopefully I've got some savings to cover it, because things can be challenging. For the club to be in a situation where there's not enough money in the bank account to pay the wages. And remember, we are operating in a digital world where major sums can be transferred from one account to another instantly. It does get the red flag starting to wave in terms of the sustainability of such a model.
What we don't know is whether Mr. Shansiri at any time would intend to sell, or whether there would be bids that he would consider viable if the worst happened and Sheffield Wednesday was a League One club again. How much value would that knock off? For instance, one of Mr. Shansiri's erstwhile advisors, Eric Alonso, has brokered a deal to buy Derby County, ironically, battling for survival as well. And that was worth about £30 million, presumably based on the fact that they're a championship club. That might change. Do you think Sheffield Wednesday have a similar value, and how much could be knocked off it if they were to go down?
What you're doing when you're buying a football club, you're buying future cash flows. And if you're in the Championship, your cash flows from TV are higher. You've got bigger opposition coming to fill the away area on a regular basis, and you're one step away from the Premier League. If you drop down into League One, you're now 2 steps away. You've got less TV money coming in. You've got smaller clubs coming to your ground. So that all has an impact on a negative basis. In terms of the Derby deal, remember that doesn't include the stadium. So because Derby County don't own their stadium anymore, which is a cause for concern. We've just seen the Ipswich deal go through. So that's a League One club. They went for, I think, around about £17.5 million, plus the new owners paid off some of the debts which were due to the owner. He discounted those. So it will have a negative impact upon any form of valuation, which is always forward-looking. And because there's so much uncertainty in football, as Sunderland has found, even with parachute payments, getting out of League One isn't as easy as some people necessarily think. And the reason for that is that because you are the big fish in the pond, and therefore Accrington want to get one over on you, and Cheltenham will do next season as well. And I think if Wednesday fans think that, OK, we're just down there, ideally just for one season, but there's no guarantees that will be the case. We've got Sunderland, Portsmouth, Ipswich, Charlton, all in that division, all clubs with sizable followings as well. And some of them are being backed either by new money or by established owners with good finances.
So effectively, Dick, you're buying a dream, aren't you?
Well, yeah. I mean, a lot of the time, I believe the people come in and they buy with the heart, not with the head. And
the other thing,
unfortunately, as well, once they're in, they also run with the heart and not with the head. And I'm sure Kieran will vouch for this. From a business point of view, that's not necessarily the right model.
No.
You have to, if you've not got any money, you have to run a tight ship. I mean, I joined Sheffield United in, end of 78. I think the first working day was about the 2nd of January 79. I opened the first bank account at the end of the month, and collectively on the accounts was £1 million overdrawn. And from there, you've then got to run a business. And we were very, very, very tight with what we did. And we turned it round. All right, it turned around with an investment. I went to Sheffield Wednesday, and I thought, when I was asked by the finance director how I'd run, I thought I went into great detail of how I'd done it at Sheffield United, and he looked at me across the table and said, Dick, you're wasting your time. All you need to do is make sure your debtors are bigger than your creditors and you've got money in the bank, and it don't matter how you run, it'll work. And I think that's right. And at the moment, if you look at football, I think they're in a situation where they are overdrawn and the creditors are higher than the debtors.
Yeah. and yet somehow it proves sustainable, Kieran, against all the realities of economics, you would have thought.
Yes, there is no logic to the economics of football.
No, sure.
We've effectively got the equivalent of the bank of mum and dad. So, when my lad comes, says it's 10 days to payday, Dad, I'm skint, and looks at me, and when he says, can you lend me any money? I say yes, and we both know, even though it's never said, we know that loan's never going to be repaid. It's just accepted. And that's what we've got in terms of the relationship between football clubs and many football club owners. And the trouble is, if you do run a sustainable football club, you don't get a lot of praise for it. In terms of the Premier League, in my view, the two clubs which run the best financial models are Burnley and Spurs. Now, the Spurs fans haven't won. Spurs haven't won the top division for over 60 years now, and Burnley fans, they're just getting a bit fed up, even though they are the fourth most profitable club in the history of the Premier League, because you don't get any prizes for that, and indeed you shouldn't do, because that's not why we fall in love in football. We fall in love with the romantic part of it. The business side of it, yes, we say we want sustainability and we want sensible ownership and management, but we don't really. We want another £50 million centre forward.
Yeah, it's the dream.
I've done several due diligence exercises in the last 4 or 5 years for people wanting to invest in football clubs. And the one thing which has come home to me more than anything is the number of staff that the clubs employ to run the club. It is unbelievable. And I think from a management point of view, and I think this also applies, in fairness, to the governing bodies. They've got that many people around them that I'm not so sure that anybody's there and they actually make the decisions, because they've always got somebody to pass things on to. And I think it needs trimming, and it needs streamlining with a far better financial control than currently exists.
Wise words. Kieran, just farewell words from you, because you've got other commitments. I haven't got time to ask you about your talk to the Romanian FA. We'll do that another time. Sheffield United's prospects. Okay, not unusual to be relegated from the Premier League. What are their prospects, do you feel, in terms of the financial structure of coming straight back?
Well, I mean, first of all, they've not come straight back. By surviving in the Premier League for 2 years, it means that you get an additional season of parachute payment money. So that's a huge benefit. They did very well as far as their season in the Premier League was concerned. As far from a financial perspective, Sheffield United made more money in 2019-20, even though they were impacted by COVID, than Sheffield Wednesday have done for the last 7 seasons. So that's, I think, it sort of contextualises just how beneficial it is to be at the top of that division. My concern for Sheffield United, and I don't like to use this word very much, because I think the word has now been tainted after some of Florentino Perez's comments last week, is they will have some legacy costs to have to deal with. They've signed players on credit. Don't think they'll necessarily recover some of the value of those signings. So therefore, whilst they'll have the benefit of 2 seasons in the Premier League and 3 years of parachute payments, some of that money will have to go to paying off existing debts to other clubs for transfers. And then there is the settlement between the owner and Kevin McCabe. Where's that money coming from? If that's money ultimately is going to come from the club's coffers, that's going to further deteriorate the position of Sheffield United's finances as well.
Yeah, so it's going to be a challenge all round. Watch this space. Well, Kieran, thank you so much for filling that space so entertainingly and informingly on the show. I'm sure we'll talk again. It never stops us talking, does football on and off the field. Kieran, thanks so much for joining us. All the best.
Thanks for the invite. Take care, Dick.
Cheers now.
Okay, thank you, Kieran.
Dick, you and I holding the fort for the final 5 or 10 minutes of the show. One of the things that we discussed off air about the mid-1980s potential breakaway from the Football League talks involving 10 clubs, including Sheffield Wednesday, there was a belief, I don't know if this was an altruistic belief, that somehow that you were benefiting or could benefit the England team. How was that thinking expressed?
Well, I think there was a general consensus of opinion around about that time that the youth system or the development side of the game needed strengthening to give you a flow of players. Subsequently, of course, that's been nullified by opening the door to the foreign influx. And if you look back into the mid-80s, Alan, I mean, we had a situation where we were excluded out of European football because of the Hazel problems. But I think if you look back in between about 1977 to probably 1984, I think an English club won the European Cup with homegrown players. And this is where I think the benefit comes from for the international side. At the present time, Gareth Southgate, in my view, and I don't know Gareth personally, he's trying to run the job, and basically his employer is tying his hands behind his back because he's hardly got players to pick from, because the influx of foreign players now is in far excess of the throughput of British talent. So, and when it comes to getting his squad together, or when the foreign players go away to join their squad, they know everything about the English players because their managers have drilled it into them when they're playing against the different teams. They take it back, put it into the national manager. The national manager has got all his homework done by the people that's out on the park. And my greatest fear for football at the present time is that I think people from the FA one day will wake up with an electric light bulb moment and say, do you know what? We don't even control our game. Because for any major alterations to the rules and the constitution of the league now, I don't know, it's 2/3 or 3/4 majorities required at a general meeting. If it was seriously to benefit the English game, I don't think the foreign owners would be putting their hands up in support of it. And I think there's a danger then that we've lost our game to the foreign influences, and I think that's sadly wrong. And I think it's sadly wrong. I think it's sadly wrong that you get a young boy coming to the football who's been carted all over the locality by his parents. He's got taken on by his local club or a club, and then all of a sudden he comes to his period of time when he can play old enough to play senior football, and he can't get a club. Or if he gets a club, they hide him in a nondescript team until he gets fed up and he packs up, completely disillusioned. And I think there is a serious need. The government did touch upon it sometime where it needs a roots and branch assessment of football in this country, and I think it does.
Well, let's hope that the fan-led government review of the operating of football led by the former Sports Minister Tracy Crouch can pin down some of the points that you so eloquently have been raised there and somehow improve this game of football. Dick, it's been fascinating to talk to you for the best part of an hour, to hear your memories and to hear your very valuable thoughts on the state of play as it is now in 2021. Dick Chester, former secretary of both Sheffield clubs. He's got his place in history there. Many thanks for joining us. Also, thank you again to Kieran Maguire, to you for watching, and we'll be back with another show, warts and all, after all the mishaps on this one, very soon. Take care.
Thank
and
you,
all the
Alan.
best to Sheffield Wednesday this weekend. Fingers crossed for you. Cheers.